The spirit in her, that strength of recognizing what happens inside, is becoming part of her flesh, part of this emerging woman, part of her own identity. There's just an infleshing of strength and courage and of understanding who she is and our own identity. All this is happening, as it will for me, hopefully, as I continue to focus on what is emerging in my life as an aging person. And out the other side comes a changed person, comes another, the new man, the new woman that Paul speaks of, that opening up to that.
And there's reconciliation there. To come home to owning what is real inside, to own the fear, to be reconciled with it. In so many instances, we forget, but Edward Schillebeeckx, who is a famous Dutch theologian, has written that the 7 cultic sacraments exist in order to make us aware of the innate sacramentality of human existence itself. So that reconciliation is more than reconciliation over my sins with God or reconciliation with my brother or sister. It must include and be grounded in reconciliation with the truth of who I am.
Reconciliation with the enemies
inside
that I
myself.
make inside myself, or people tell me I have inside myself. She had turned that very clearly in this letter. She turned that pain or that fear into an enemy, didn't she? Remember how she said, I thought of everything else and when tried my best, and even when I was focusing with Mommy, I focused all around it. Why? She'd made it into the enemy. Until there was the reconciliation, nothing moved forward, nothing changed inside. So there's that. That, and also, what did she do? Well, there's the embracing of the cross. The little girl embraced the cross there. Now, there was a dying, like Maureen was pointing out in the dynamic that she had on the board of the 12 steps in the focusing. There was a dying and a resurrection in that child's life in this story alone. But once again, you see, in continuing incarnation. And another whole profound thing in this is Eucharist. Because Eucharist is real presence. And what happens every time you focus? You literally invite God's grace to pronounce on your own body a transubstantiation. Think of it. Every time you focus, and there's this gift of grace, there is this reconciliation, there is this incarnation, your body physically changes into more of reality, of realness. You own the truth of yourself. And you become literally what? A more real presence, Eucharist. And what's the effect of that on you and on other people? Life-giving. You become Eucharist every time you focus. You become more that real presence that yields and brings that gift. Just by that being that truthfulness infleshed. A real transubstantiation in your own body.
Do you remember the old catechism definition? Sacraments effect what they signify. When I am truly present to another, it enables that other to become present to himself or herself. It's like, as I am present to others and present to myself, it's like ripples moving out when you drop a stone in the water. And isn't that the issue for all of us? Isn't it really the issue of presence? The loneliness so many feel, the fear and alienation and isolation that so many feel. It's all around presence. If I'm scared of 3/4 of what's inside me, then I can't be present to myself. I live in a house with people, and maybe there's presence, or maybe it's just a hotel. This issue of presence is central, especially in our culture.
No wonder we value Eucharist, even if we don't know how to live it.
Even if we don't understand
We
it.
still know that there's something there that's the heart of our faith and of the whole mystery of the presence of Christ, this body of Christ. And then you can see in it also that there's a Paschal mystery that we go through every time we focus, isn't there? There's that whole dying. There's Good Friday and Easter Sunday. There's that whole constant cycle of death and resurrection, as once again Maureen brought up with the chart last night. The Paschal mystery every single time. And I think all these things, these words, incarnation, Eucharist, grace, the cross, reconciliation, Paschal mystery, sacrament. As a psychologist, working to a great extent with my early part of my life with colleagues who had nothing to do, in fact, were very anti-clerical, nothing to do with religion, I began to more and more appreciate that all of these theological terms, all of these are basically in the early church human experiences of the growth process that all human beings have to go through, and that they are really telling us more about, or most about, ourselves and the steps of human growth than they are saying anything about theological kind of constructs. These are really important psychological learnings or truths. That, for example, the embracing of the cross is not something masochistic like that. It's an absolutely essential law of human development, that there be a dying and a rebirthing, that the seed fall into the ground, and otherwise the plant can't come up. Just as in the 12 steps those are basic laws of human development that are there, and the steps in focusing. The Paschal mystery. And look at little Elizabeth, and look at Brother Darrow in these 2 letters. There's a conversion here. Conversion in the deep sense of the word, not moving from one club to the other, or becoming a Methodist or Episcopalian or something like that. That deep conversion of finally surrendering to the truth of myself with that consciousness, like Sister Roma was trying to say, of being in God, being grounded, being in some larger power that I can trust being real in. And with that kind of surrender to the truth of myself, what did Elizabeth said? That just wasn't there. It just melted away.
Highlight an extra little piece of, like a piece of what Maureen was doing for us last night, to appreciate that the challenge in our time is to find ways to say this message, but to say it from within experiencing of it. That's the challenge, and the real pioneers in our time are the people who live a process, who live an unfolding in their daily life, and then out of the experience of that unfolding, they find their own way to say incarnation, sacrament, Eucharist, resurrection, but they say it not just with the word that in so many instances we have heard as information, but they say it in and through and with and out of the experience. That's what we are seeking. That's what people are hungering for in their lives today. When we can find the message within our own process or within the process of being with someone else and let it speak itself out of that, that's the good news. And that's what people are hungry for today. And tragically, in so many instances within organized religion, they are not finding it. And they are empty.
Maybe in closing this afternoon, someone asked, well, how is focusing prayer? And maybe one of the responses I might give, or how can one use focusing in prayer? I think there are many, many ways to do it. Like I've already suggested, reading Scripture, for example, in a focusing way. Taking one of the Psalms and sitting with the felt sense of that. But there's even more for us in our tradition, I think, even a deeper way of using focusing as prayer. And it's part of a whole transformation that has to happen to us from this outside thing to something inside. And so let me just read you and share with you what came as the symbol to a focusing experience of my own. Well, I think I put it in something. Maybe it's in the book. I don't remember. But this is what I wrote down. Maybe if Jesus were among us today and speaking to us, he might say something like this. "O you of little faith, have I been with you so long and you still don't realize that you deny me? That you give me no place in the inn when you not only deny your brokenness, but then go on to create me as the ideal parent, the loyal friend, the tender lover, the caring spouse you haven't had. O you of little faith, how often you have created me as the fantasy of your unfulfilled dreams and pushed me away as I really am, refusing me a place in your heart. Instead, you grasp at anything that keeps you from embracing me as I really exist inside you. Even in my name, you use prayer to deny me room in your heart. How long will it be before you give me the acceptance, the caring, the open gentleness I long for within the very fears and pain and incompleteness that is you? O you of little faith, do you not yet know that I am that terror of loneliness in your body? I am that emptiness that you feel. I am that sadness in your heart. I am those tears of frustration and anger. I am that place inside you where you feel there is no answer. And yet when you feel me, you still push me away and do not understand. And you who claim to lead others to me and to know me, instead of knowing me in your own brokenness and then lovingly guiding others to find me in theirs, instead you use their needs and confusion to gain power for yourselves. You are like whited sepulchres. You give laws and words and pageantry and promises of the future instead of the companionship of your own vulnerability, which invites me and the power of my Spirit into your hearts. Woe to those who rape the pain of others with their power, their words, and their false comfort, leaving them helpless, addicted in dependency, and alone on their journey. Yes, the pearl of great price, the kingdom of heaven, is indeed inside each of you if you do not run from it when you are fearful or pained in your body. I have emptied myself into your body, into all that is real in you, incomplete, unfinished, and weak as you may be. And it is there and only there that you will find me as I really am, in my crucifixion and in the power of my resurrected body. My body now is your body, and your body now is my body, which is being given for the life of the world. And so I pray that your inward eyes may be illumined in faith, that you may find me in owning my crucifixion in your own body. Then the Spirit will come and dwell in your hearts, and you will know the power of that hope to which you are called. I'd like to share with you now an image that is very powerful for me, one that means a lot to me, and I think it's an image of hope and of spiritual guidance. I'm sharing it with you in my home because it's a large piece that hangs on the wall of my living room, and we're unable to take it down and photograph it elsewhere. So I'll share it with you from my living room. A number of years ago, Pete and I went to Southern California to give a workshop, and afterwards I had a day or two to relax, and we went to a nearby town. And Pete said he needed to spend some time in a computer store there, and I didn't want to spend that much time there. So I suggested to him that I would go across the street and be in a gallery looking around, and I thought I saw a bench in there, and I said I would wait for him there. So I went inside this gallery and I poked around for a few moments, and then I sat down on the bench, and my eye was caught by this piece that's on the wall behind me as I sit here. This large piece with a lot of movement in it. So I sat there watching it for a while, and there was no one else in the gallery, and the owner was over in the corner by a desk over there, and he was looking at me every once in a while. And I was trying to figure out what this is. I couldn't understand it. All I could see was a lot of movement, and I was caught by it. So he was watching me, and I guess he put two and two together, and he came over and sat down on me next to the bench and introduced himself, and I told him who I was and why I was caught by that. I said, there's something really intriguing in that. And he said, let me tell you this story about it. He said the artist was a businessman in this town for a number of years, and he went through a difficult period in his life a few years back where he had an accident, and it left him somewhat crippled, and he couldn't do the heavy lifting that his furniture business required. And at the same time, his wife divorced him and left him with two small boys. And he said, I've known this man for many years, and I knew he was really going through a kind of midlife crisis, as well as a lot of reconsidering what he should do with the rest of his life. So he said, I knew that he sold his business, and then he disappeared. Then he said one day he came back with this piece of art. And he told me that he had gone into the desert, and that he had bought 5 acres of land there, took his boys with him, and they built their own little house out there. And he said, I went into the desert to find my own spirit. And that's what this story is about. It's about that part of ourselves that each day needs to be born by the way we carry and relate and connect with what's around us. The beauty of nature, of people in our lives, as well as pain and fear and disappointment and confusion like this man found in his life at that period of time. So he said, we went out there, my 2 sons and I, and he said, I went there to find my own spirit. He said, many years of work and supporting my family and so forth seemed to have covered that spirit up, and I didn't really know who I was any longer. But he said, as we spent time together out there in the desert and building our little house and putting in a garden, drilling a well and planting trees around our home, he said, I began to understand and connect with this world around me, which I hadn't done much of as a businessman in town when I had the store here. And he said, gradually I began to understand that I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to express what I had discovered and share it with other people. So he said, the owner of that gallery said to me, let me explain it to you. Do you understand? Do you see what is up there? And I said, no, I can't really understand. get anything out of it other than a lot of movement, which attracts me. So he took a pointer, and you can see it up yourself now with a little arrow on it. He pointed to the nose. He said, this is where it's a picture of, it's the artist's concept of an Indian, a Plains Indian. And it's just the top part of the body, and he's riding on a pony, on a horse. And that's what they used to ride on when they would attack another tribe or someone that they wanted to injure in some way. They would ride up with ponies on them, with their tomahawks or bows and arrows, or what they called a coup stick, which is something like a boomerang or something like a club, but it has decorated with feathers. So if you look at this figure, you'll see that coup stick out in front. So he's riding along, and the wind is blowing his hair. You can see the hair flying, black hair flying in the wind. And on top of his head, he has the war bonnet. You see the feathers there. And then the hands are out like this, and he has in the hand this kind of boomerang-shaped stick with feathers on it. That's the coup stick. So he's riding along there, and usually they're riding after the enemy. But in this case, it's something else, which was fascinating to me. And he said that the Indians believe, these Plains Indians believe, that the greatest act of bravery was to ride along like that, right up to your enemy, and instead of taking that coup stick, that hard, almost like metal stick, and hitting him like the knights used to do, knock them off the horse or break their skull, to come right up next to the enemy and touch the enemy in a non-violent way. Somewhat similar to the bullfight, I suppose you could say, in Mexico or in Spain. To have a death brush shoot right by you, and in a non-violent way you do this graceful dance. So they considered that the greatest act of bravery was not violence, but was to touch the enemy with the coup stick. And I said, now how is that related to this man and his story? He said he calls this spirit chaser, because he said this is himself. And he always loved Indian stories as a little boy. Himself out riding there like an Indian with the hair flying and the coup stick in his hand, and he's chasing his own spirit in a non-violent way. And he said, I discovered there in the desert that to encounter and chase my own spirit is the greatest act of bravery and courage that I have ever had to do in my life, and to do it in a non-violent way. So I could see that image then when he pointed it out to me. And I was really touched by it and moved by it, because I said to him, well, that's really what we do in focusing and with caring, feeling presence. We try to touch that part of ourselves that we can feel in our bodies, that the birth of our own spirit as we sense it and feel it inside, not yet finished but being born, but touch that birth of our spirit and nurture it in a non-violent way so that it can be born each day. So this image now is in my home and is on the wall of my home, because it's, to me, is a sign of hope, a sign of spiritual guidance, of how we must treat ourselves in this caring and gentle way that allows our spirit to be born. Out in simple language to people, but it's quite a job. So What I do see at this point, and I hope I can give you a bit of this if we have time enough before the week is over. But what I do see is that there's a convergence for those of us who are interested in spirituality. There's a convergence of the basic essentials of human knowing that are clearly brought out both in John and in Paul, of the process within which we come to feel and recognize the presence of God, and that sense that Paul constantly speaks of being in the body of Christ. And that all converges in what Gentleman is calling the felt sense. So these essential components